Hello, my name is Debbie, Alligator Stitcher. Welcome to Flosstube number 17. Today is Tuesday, August 31st, 2021, and this is take 2 of my video. I filmed the first one, all went well. My husband was actually out, so I was like, this is a great time to film everything, and said goodbye, turned it off, and then all of a sudden my computer decided to tell me at that moment that the file was corrupted. Don't know what happened there. I deleted a bunch of stuff off of my tablet, so hopefully it will work out better this time. But for those of you who are new here, this is a video mainly about cross stitch, a little bit about what I'm reading and watching, and life thrown in. So for those of you who watched my last video, and my cat just jumped on the bed and knocked half of my things off, but I'm just going to go with it. I am, a couple weeks ago, I fell and broke my elbow. I am still in my sling. You can sort of see the strap here, but it's doing much better. I go back to the doctor tomorrow, and hopefully he will tell me that I no longer have to wear my sling. I don't have full mobility yet with my elbow, but I can almost straighten it the whole way, and I can rotate it. I can carry light things, like I can carry a bag of groceries as long as there's not a ton of heavy stuff in it. But if I try to do anything too serious, my arm lets me know immediately, and I don't push it. I want it to get better. So hopefully tomorrow they will give me a green light to do things like drive again. So that will be good. Wearing the sling at this point, it's just a reminder that I don't do something silly like try and push off, stand up from a chair and put my arm on the arm, put my hand on the armchairs to try and stand up, because that will send a pain shooting down my arm. But I walk for a few miles every morning now just to get some exercise, and I live in Florida, and let's just say this thing doesn't smell as good as I would like it to smell. It doesn't bother me on a regular basis, but I get very conscious when I'm in public, so I actually will spritz my spritz it with a little perfume before I go out, hoping that will cover up whatever was there. Other than that, things are going well for me. I had a birthday a few days ago, so it was a very quiet celebration, but had good time with my parents and my husband. And because it's been relatively quiet here, and I've mentioned this before, but I live in Florida and COVID is raging, we actually have as many hospitalizations now as we did during the peak periods in 2020, because now people, unvaccinated people, are going out and they're acting as if there is no virus. So I think people were more cautious in 2020, and so now, while, as we all know with the Delta variant, if you have been vaccinated, you can still get the Delta variant, but you're much less likely to come down with something serious. You might get it and not feel well, and none of us want to feel sick, but you're not going to end up hospitalized. My county does a great job of sharing. They have a dashboard where they share all sorts of statistics, but they also I follow them on Facebook, and every day they show a different graphic, and if you want to see all of the graphics, you can see it, but it very clearly shows that like the rate of hospitalizations of vaccinated versus unvaccinated people for COVID, it's like 95 versus 5% or something like that. And then when you start talking about who's on a ventilator and who's in the ICU, those numbers are even more dramatic. But I think the one that really stuck out for me was here in Florida. We've had 49,000 deaths that are directly attributed to COVID since this started about a year and a half ago. That's a lot of people just for one state. Again, I really encourage you, if you are not vaccinated, to do proper research and look at, is this the right decision for you? Now, obviously, there are some people it is not the right decision if you have autoimmune disease or other things. But other than that, I really, I am very much in the, you're right. We may not know what happens 10 years from now with this vaccine, but we do know what happens within a few weeks if you get a serious case of COVID, and then you don't really care about 10 years because you're dead. Please do your research, and I hope that you will, if you're not vaccinated, take that opportunity. All right, I'm now going to jump off that soapbox, and I'm going to move talking about stitching. I think a lot of Flosstubers, if they're in the Northern Hemisphere, because it's towards the end of the summer and they're either taking vacations, or they're getting kids ready for school, or doing whatever they need to do. And so as a result of that, there hasn't been as much content. I thoroughly hope those people are enjoying their lives. This is not a criticism at all, but what it has led me to do is to seek out new Flosstubers. You know, lots of lists. You know, I have stitchy friends of mine who recommend some people, or, you know, you can just go to YouTube and type in Flosstube, and lots of things come up. But what happened was I watch a lot of my Flosstube on the TV that's right behind me. And so I'm sorry, that's my cat who's misbehaving here. Maya, you want to be on Flosstube? And that answer would be no. She's just going to be a little impish in the room. And now she's very upset because my husband shut the door. But anyhow, I was going up and, you know, clicking, you know, on the TV trying to get to the subscribe button, which I did. But then I noticed that one of the options that YouTube has now added is you can now hit increase the playback speed. So a few months ago I mentioned this, that one of my frustrations of watching Flosstube on TV was that I had to watch it at regular speed. Oop, there's Maya back there. You can see her right there. But so anyhow, you know, and it's, I think, you know, a lot, you know, you can probably go quickly through me because I have lots of ums and ahs and everything. And it just helps you to see more content, and helps you, you know, again, if you want to see something more slowly, you can slow it back down or whatever. But I was really excited to see that. So thank you, YouTube, for listening to many of your customers and giving that feature now on television. That's really exciting for me. And it, as a result, has led me to find even more Flosstubers. So I probably, over the past 2 weeks, have subscribed to probably 15 more Flosstube or YouTube channels, but Flosstube. And in that vein, one of the people I've started watching recently is, and I've heard her name for quite a while, but because I was sort of at my max capacity of how many I could watch a week, I wasn't going to look for more. But now that I had time, I went to find her, and that is Desiree, the Addicted Stitcher. So in the way that she spells it is ADD is all capital, and then ICTED is in small letters, because she also has ADD, and she's very open about that on her Flosstube channel. Desiree, I believe, is based in Germany, and she has her Flosstubes are in English, for those of you who don't speak German, but she has a lot of lovely stitching and a great variety. So if you haven't already gone to check her out, I encourage you to do so. So with that, I'm actually going to start show you some stitching, and I'm sorry if I, from time to time, bend down and go out of frame, because again, I'm going to point to the culprit there, Maya. That's Maya. Love her dearly. She can be a bit impish at times when she knocks everything off. The first thing I'm going to show you is, and I show this almost every video, is Old World Map by Artisy. This is my oldest project. I started it in 2019, and that's when I went from being a monogamous stitcher to start everything. And so I don't want to say I work on this every day. For a while, I was in a period where I tried to work on it every day. And sometimes I still pick it up and work for a half hour, 45 minutes. But I also find that there are times where I just want to sit down and work on it a lot, and then I won't work on it for another couple of days. So this was in one of those periods, and part of the reason why this also happened was this was my focus piece last week for Crystal Academy, and I also used it for Magical Stitches. We had to, you pick to work on 2 of your largest projects or your 2 smallest. And this is my second largest with about 246,000 stitches. So what I did, because I was trying to make sure that the admins could see it, I just sort of said, okay, I'm going to sort of work in this area here. I had already done this black line, and I was like, what is that black line that's going across the globe? So I looked at the picture, and I discovered that is the northern part of Asia. So I was like, yes, I'm getting to actual continent. And so I started picking some of the colors here. So some of these pinks here. There's a couple shades of pink that are in there. And then sort of those pinks sort of somewhere, they sort of would reappear up here. And then once I started working up there, I decided just to keep working up there. So didn't really come back and continue to work much on Asia. And I think when I say Asia, I think this is like northern Russia, Siberia, things like that. So anyhow, since it's an old world map, I'm not even sure that Russia as a concept existed. There was Ruth, but I'm not sure if it was Russia. But anyhow, so I did a lot here. I actually filled in quite a bit, got the section done, and did a little bit more down here and some of these golds and yellows as well here. Had fun working on that. Got in, I don't know, probably 800 stitches or so last week, and then probably a few hundred more the week before that as well. So that is Old World Map. Next one I would like to show you is another artsy piece. This is The Green Dancer, artwork by Edgar Degas, so painting from the 19th century. And I took off a piece of the Q-snap. So these are the top 3 pages here, and so I'm working collectively on these 3 pages here. I only have a printed version of this, and so but I am, so it goes a little bit more slowly than if I were doing a pattern keeper. But I'm sort of doing them all 3 at the same time because it's a big print pattern. I didn't know that's what I was buying, which is actually what I prefer if I'm doing paper. But so there's not a huge number. This is 139 stitches across, so it's not each page and divide that. It's fewer than 50 stitches across on each page, so not that many. It's quite large print. And so I just yesterday picked this up because for Crystal Academy I'm using it, and then also for Magical Stitches we had to stitch on something that would have could have a hidden door, and I said they're on a stage. Lots of stage productions have hidden doors so they can have people pop up and do sorts of things. Probably not as much as in a ballet, but nonetheless we all use the same stage, whether it's dancing or acting or concerts or anything else. So I pushed it because I wanted to double dip my stitches. So what I did yesterday, I put in about 500 stitches, and I was also using this for my Harry Potter group. We were playing a game of Quidditch yesterday, and I was the seeker for a couple of rounds. Was not successful, but I put in about 500 stitches. But because I wanted to do it quickly, I picked areas of this that I thought would go quickly. So all of this sort of gray color here, there was a little bit probably to here, so I just filled in here. Also did quite a bit of her hair, and then some of this sort of greenish color like the 502. I didn't do much of it because even though it was there was quite a bit of it, there was a lot of counting involved with it, and I decided if I'm trying to stitch for speed, that's not the way to do it. I will pick this up and probably pick some of these colors here that are sort of appearing up here, like the oranges that literally I think on this pattern I just use them here and here, and then they don't appear anywhere else in the project again. And I'm going to show this again to you later when I talk about something that I learned. Next project I want to show you is this is a Heaven and Earth design, artwork by Aimee Stewart. So this is my largest project, so I use this for enchanted stitching, and here's where I am. So I had this is while I'm doing a pattern keeper, I do keep the page breaks in, and so somewhere a couple rows up here is the bottom of this. This is 2 pages down. So here, so I'd already done quite a bit over here. I finished off this stripe here on the wallpaper. I brought it down. There may be one more color I need to put in there. Did a little bit of the, picked up the colors around the frame. I also then sort of bit the bullet and said, okay, I'm going to do some of the stitches that are, the colors don't appear frequently, at least in this part of the pattern. There may be 5 or 6 stitches in those colors, and so I did them. Of course, that just takes longer because you have to, pull out the color, thread your needle, stitch, probably cut it, and because it was up here and then it's down here, I don't want to stretch my thread that far, so it just took a little bit more time. So I got bored with that quickly and went back and picked up some more of the pinks. Eventually I'll have to bite the bullet and do it, I know that, but I just again was trying to work on this. I had to put in 500 stitches, and it wasn't a piece I was planning to pull out originally, so I just wanted to sort of to get it done in the time frame I had allotted. So that is Little Cake Shop. Next piece I would like to show you is, this is Cozy Cardinals from the December 2020 Just Cross Stitch. So this was my focus piece for the magazine monthly challenge. And here's where it is now. So I basically had only done sort of the border, and I did that in very late 2019 to get 200 stitches in, and hadn't done anything else. So this is my second to last whip that project that I worked on that I had not touched this year. So I put in over 500 stitches, and I started doing the tail, and then went and moved up and did the yellow in this cardinal. The day that I chose to work on this was the day I could do nothing right with my stitching. And so I started, and the very first stitch I put in, I counted off from the border here, and I probably did almost all of the red, so it was a little over 150 stitches. And then I realized, I think because I sort of would start here and go up and did all this, and then as I finally came down and did this color, I realized I had miscounted somewhere, and where I miscounted was right there, the very first stitch I put in. I was not going to rip all of that out. I made a decision, and I looked at it and the pattern, and so I think I'm going to finish doing this bird, and then I'm going to do the other cardinal, and that cardinal there'll be one stitch, so he will be placed correctly on the pattern, but because this one is not, so there'll be one stitch less in between. They don't touch or anything, and then I can just fudge the branches and all of that in between. That's not hard to do. But then I also discovered, because when I did the border, I was just sitting and stitching, and I did want to put a little bit of the snowflakes in to see how they would appear, because this fabric is slightly lighter than what is called for. I mean, it's still sort of a nice dark blue, sort of evening sky blue, but it's the other one is a little bit darker, and I wanted to see this color here. I can't remember what it was, but I wanted to see how it appeared against this, and still wasn't 100% sure, but I decided I'm just going to leave it. The snowflakes, if they sort of blend in a little bit, that's not a big deal. But as I was putting, I started up here, did all of that, and then I realized, because I had just done this in December with probably not the best light, I had on one of my stitches down here on the X had realized that it was this should be 2 over 2, and I had gone up 2 but only over 1, and this is linen, so obviously it's not perfectly even anyhow, but nonetheless, again, I wasn't ripping it out because that would have meant this bird and everything else, and I just didn't feel like doing it. So again, I will fudge it, the snowflakes, that whatever, it's not going to be noticeable. I just notice it. I have since then, I have started doing almost all my linen pieces under a magnifier, and that's just a realization I came to. I do have reading glasses, but people talk about, oh, it's so easy if you just remember the warp and the weft. No, even with my glasses and the magnifier, I can't see it well enough to sort of use that as my guide about always knowing which hole I should be coming up in. And so as a result, it's not a big deal. For another piece, I ended up, because I wanted to work on it, yet I wanted to watch a football game with my husband, I just moved the magnifier. It's a big, heavy magnifier because it's it's a floor stand magnifier. I just moved into the other room, and it's fine. So anyhow, this is Cozy Cardinals, and glad at the progress that I did make on it. I'm going to really bend out of the picture and get with the cat destroyed. Okay, I'm back. So this is O Joyous Day by Blackbird Designs. I think many of you are familiar with this pattern. And this is, so here's where I am now. This was my Whip Go piece for August. So basically, I finished this flower entirely, except I still have to do an eyelet stitch in there, which I will do the next time I pick up. This flower also, the colors in the middle are missing, but and just regular stitches, and then they're little buds, like you can sort of see over here in these flowers. Again, doing that won't take very much time, and I do plan to pick this up in September and work on it. A lot of fun to work on. Glad I had an excuse to pull this out for a little bit this month. Next piece I'm going to show you is Fabulous Women in History by Cloudsfactory. So here's where it is now. So you can see I've got 4 of the women and all of their backgrounds done. What I did since last time I showed this was I did the real, and it says women are the real architects of society. So I had Jane Austen herself done, but I did this whole house and her inkwell. I also did the nameplates for both Elizabeth I and for Jane Austen. And I want to take a little break from showing you my stitching to talk about a video that Cheryl McKinney from Tranquil Stitches did. She does regular floss tubes, but she also does from time to time tricks and tips for cross stitchers. She has been stitching for over 30 years, and she will never say that she is, a professional stitcher. She doesn't, but she said, just things that she's learned along her journey in cross stitching. I've been stitching for over 30 years as well. But every now and then, we all can still learn, and I learned from her video. And it was one where she was talking about how to have like cleaner stitches. And so what she does is she's got a great setup where she has the camera and is looking at a piece of fabric, and how does she stitch on it. So she stitched the version. There are 3 basic ways you can stitch. You can either do, all the legs in one direction and then come back and finish the crosses. You can do 1 X at a time, where you either do all the way up and all the way down, so you always start, if you do your first leg in the bottom, your second leg starts in the bottom and goes up, and then, your next X the same way. And then there's a 3rd method, which I believe is called the Victorian method. And Jean Farish has a video that talks about these 3 kinds of stitches, which is how I kind of know about it. One is like continental and one is English, but I think of the Victorian version. And when Jean Farish was talking about it, I watched it and I sort of didn't understand why you would do it that way. But sort of taking that memory in, what she said, and then what Cheryl said in her video, and it was like a light bulb went off. And it's been in particular on this piece. So and this was stitched a long time ago, but I've got like this horse here, all these white stitches, and I really struggled with them. And intuitively, I sort of figured out what I needed to do to get them to lay right, but it wasn't, I changed how I was stitching. And again, that's B5200. It's not a variegated thread, but sort of what would make it look good for me. But when I watched Cheryl's video, it was like I had an aha moment. And so I'm really proud of the stitching I did on the house. It is, this is a picture of this flops. It's fabric. It's kind of floppy. It's opalescent, which I love the fabric, but it's a little bit hard to stitch on. I do it in a Q-snap under the magnifier, all that stuff. But everyone knows Picture This Plus has, tighter holes and all that because of the dyeing process, and I'm totally fine with it. But Cheryl's basic video, and I will add a link in the drop-down box below. But basically, she talks about whenever if you're going through the front of your fabric and pulling to the back, that you should always be pulling your stitch sort of behind the X. And she talks about like being good neighbors. Like that's the way you stay, if you've got, in a normal cross stitch, every hole, if it's got stitches all the way around it, will have four, you go through that hole 4 times. And you don't want, you want to make sure there's space for all 4 of them, and you want them to get along. And so basically, and again, my second video, I still should have done this, draw this out, and it's hard for me with my sling. But basically, you have your X here, and 3 of the 4 holes, you start however you start, but let's say you start here and you go up to this hole here. Then when you're going down, you're pulling this hole, you're pulling this hole down. So you're doing exactly, and then when you go, so 3 of them, you go up, you're pulling across the X, and then you go down and you pull it down so you're still within the barrier of the X. So now you've pulled that into, again, I'm not talking like so tight or anything, but you pulled it down and then you go up through the 3rd hole and you're pulling it across. So 3 of those holes automatically, if you're doing 1 X at a time, automatically are pulling into the X. And then the question is, what do you do with the 4th one? And Cheryl's point was, what you don't want, if this little point here is your 4th hole, you still want to find a way to pull this back across this X. So you have to decide, where are you going next? If you're going over here and this is your last stitch, you're pulling away from your X, and as she would say, this makes it a bad neighbor. And that, and so your stitching might not lay as pretty. So the Victoria method, basically the way it does is that when you come up to that 4th hole, you sort of, rather than going, if you've done this stitch from bottom to top and now you do this stitch, rather than going from bottom to top, you come up, you go down, and then if you're going over here, you're still, obviously you're pulling over to the next X, but you're pulling this across the back of your stitch. And I wanted to pull out Green Dancer just to show you. It's a little bit hard to see on this, but I think this is, sort of the best way. This is the back of my Green Dancer. This part here was done, I don't know when it was done, but before I sort of practiced this. So you can sort of see it. I mean, it does look like a black blob, but to the extent that you can see anything on the back, it's going up and down, because I am always, I was always going bottom to top with each leg. Didn't matter which direction. And then I would pull it over, and I was also going back and forth because I do 1 X at a time. And I do 1 X at a time even on when it's not variegated thread, because I think that helps me with my page breaks. But then you can see here, sort of following what Cheryl said and doing the Victorian stitch, and she doesn't call it that, but that's sort of what I picked up from Jean Farish. You can see all of a sudden those are going across, so it just looks different. And on a full coverage, it's much harder to see, and no one's really looking at your stitches that carefully. But I practice it on my full coverage, because you do have to look about, you can do your first leg, and then before you do your second leg, you think, where am I going with this? Where am I going on the next stitch, so that I can pull this across the back? It doesn't always work perfectly. There are times, if you want to make sure that all your X's cross the same way, and there are times in your pattern where the stitches, there's no way not to pull away from the hole. Especially if you're, got something that's going down a diagonal, sometimes it doesn't work. But overall, for me, just that little change and sort of that going through really made a difference in my stitching. So I've thanked her on her video, but thank you again, Cheryl. That really was sort of a light bulb moment for me, and we can learn so much from the Flosstube community. So I encourage you to watch Cheryl's video on that, and I don't think I'll be able to find the one that Jean Farish did, because that was several months ago, but it was really helpful for me. So with that said, I have one more piece to show you, and I deliberately left this for the last one, because I'm very happy with it. And now that's the second time it's not. I had it all folded nicely before. And that is Cats in the Toy Box by Heaven Earth Design. And I think the cat has sent my cover flying, so I don't have it. So here is where it is now. I've pulled it out of the Q-snap because I'm going to move it. So that's sort of where we are now. So I've got the whole top row of pages done. And here's where I have been working on it. So I managed to get all the stitches in the Tabby Cat done, and did all the stitches on the border down to here, quite a few more in the clown, all the stitches in the koala head. He still has more in his neck area and stuff. And then I love, it won't look like this in the end, but the kitty, I just love the way it sort of looks here with the ear and then the one eye, and just sort of the way that is coming out. This piece, however, I sort of had a little bit of a shock. So, do stitching along, and because I do cross country, I'm used to, if I do, column or a row of stitches, and there's a color that's not used very frequently in the pattern, I'll end up with little gaps, and then I'll eventually get around to filling in that stitch. So it doesn't give me pause to do that at all. That if I'm stitching and be like, oh, there's no oh, I need to these stitches here. So but I decided that after I sort of came to here, which is like the page finish, and then I wanted to start pulling in my colors from the side. And so I started working on the border here. And then all of a sudden, and I just assumed, like, I could see, like, there were 3 stitches that were, according to Pattern Keeper, unstitched. And then beneath it was a row of white. And I thought, that was just a light color I had filled in. And the colors were like 6, 4, 7 and other things that were relatively light. So the fact that it was very pale on Pattern Keeper didn't shock me. And then all of a sudden, I got to about 1 stitch left that still had the pattern on Pattern Keeper. And I sort of went, that doesn't look right. And I'll see if I can get the Pattern Keeper to pop up here. Recognize me. Now, of course, my tablet wants to be difficult. Here we go. So, and I've blown this up so you can see. So you see this is the one symbol that I hadn't done. And everything, I was sort of assuming that I had, without really looking at it, I thought, okay, they're filled in. That means that everything is done. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, I hadn't done any of that. That was not, well, it would have naturally been a light colored stitch, like everything above it. I didn't think it was going to be that, it's not white. None of those stitches are white or B5200 or whatever it might be. They do have some color to it. So I actually thought maybe there's a mistake in the chart and somehow this didn't get charted. And so I wrote to Heaven and Earth Designs, and Michelle answered very quickly, and she said this was actually a weird pattern because it wasn't flush. And I have I printed off the cover of a PDF, so you can't really tell any, it's not a laser printer, it's not a high quality printer. And the way that it looks like it's kind of curvy anyhow, which it's not. So I think that's just the quality of my printer. And so Michelle had decided to be true to the artwork, which wasn't apparently totally flush. And so when she charted it, all of a sudden, after you go down to somewhere around here, maybe it's a little bit higher, that the rest of this one row of stitches just ends. And I don't mind, like on a full coverage pattern, if you have things sticking out. This one is a prime example where you have the basket handle here is sticking out above the rest of it. Like that's part of the way it should be. This is a piece I'm going to get professionally framed, and so I normally don't mat my cross stitch, but when you have to cut something else, I think, it won't look good just to have a bunch of like one row of white aida around it. So I will probably have mat cut in it so that the basket can stick out, and I'm totally fine with that. But the question is, what do I do now with this over here? Because I've never done a full coverage where, I don't remember what the dimensions are, but let's say it was 300 by 400. It's 300 by 400 until a certain point, and then it's 299 by 400 for the rest of it. Like I'm used to having a nice rectangle shape, or if it's a big round one too, whatever. But that there's some balance to it. So now I have to make the decision, because her suggestion was, if it bothers me, and again, she wasn't like, it was a perfectly pleasant exchange, but she's like, if it bothers you, then just don't stitch this here. Well, I've already stitched it, and I thought about, I could just make something up. It's a border, but as it gets further down in the picture, there's actually like the border, it's not necessarily going all the way the same down. And I will say it's one row of very light here, and then the very next row is something very dark. And then all of a sudden, like somewhere down here, it does shift in so that it's then light and dark. So it is following sort of the curvature of the art. And on this side, it is basically really dark on the way down, But then on the top, you have the light row and then the dark row. So I have to figure it out. Basically, when I stitch again, I'm going to pick it up and put the Q-snap back over on this side. And by the time I get back over here to have to deal with that again, it's probably going to be a year from now. I have plenty of time to think about it. My guess is one of two things will happen. Either I will just let it be, and then when I go to get it framed with the mat, I'm going to say, can the mat cover up this row? Which is probably what I will do. And it's not because I'm lazy and can't put a seam ripper on it, but because the way the stitches are, like, it's not just one row of color all the way down. And so it's, sometimes the colors go over into, maybe not the next row, but next column, but the column over it. And so it would just mean I'll have a lot of hanging threads and a lot of things that would come out, might come out because of it. And I don't really want to have that. So I will get closer to that. Again, this is, it is my focus piece for this year and probably will be my focus piece for next year. I'm not even sure, even if I, I'm at 30% on this project right now, and I put in a huge amount of stitches on, I think this month was a small month for me. I only put in 4,000, but I put in upwards of like 5,000 or 6,000 stitches a month on this. And if going at that, even at that pace, I will not finish it in 2022. So I have several years to worry about this, and I'll figure it out. But just the moral of the story is, and it's one I have to keep telling myself, look at the whole pattern, figure out, just because someone has recommended a colorway or someone has recommended, take a look at what you're actually doing. And again, this was not a mistake. Michelle was conscious of it. I do kind of wish that there was something that sort of said, because I do read the instructions, that it said, just, sort of beware. And I've had that on other patterns where they sort of say, they'll sort of make a comment like, it was a Just Nan pattern where there was back stitching over a certain part, and she said, I know it's hard to read the stitches beneath the back stitching here because you were going through the middle of a stitch, and this is a symbol underneath it. And I really, really appreciated that when designers do that, because they don't make things so difficult for you. So that is all the stitching I have done that I'd like to show you. I'd like to go a little bit into my plans. September starts tomorrow. So I have, for one of the Facebook groups I'm in, letters of the month. So I'm up to Q and R. So my Q is Mystic Stitch, Tug of War, and you can either do something from the title, or so you can't do designer, but from the title or a major motif. And obviously the quilt is over half of this pattern, so I chose quilt Q. So this is my Q. I'm still doing background, and we'll be doing background for a long time on this. So here's where I am now. This line here, because this was all just 310. So boy, whenever I was doing a game where I needed to stitch for speed, I did a lot of 310. This was the easiest piece to pick up because I didn't even have, once I did like the corner stitch here, it was just back and forth, and I didn't have to count it, and then I'd be like, okay, I did X number of rows, and that's, do the math. It was very easy. Again, this is a print pattern, so I don't have Pattern Keeper to count for me. But this is the clothespin here. So this is where the page break is for page 1, but I took the black all the way over. So I have that, the clothespin. I think the little bird might start a little bit over here. I'm not sure. My goal on this is 500 stitches, and that is probably what I will put into it, unless one of my games that I'll talk about in a minute takes me to do more. So the next piece I have for letters of the month is R. So Let Freedom Ring for R. So this is Lila Studio. And here's where I am now. Basically, I have almost finished the first page on this. I've mentioned this before. I'm missing the color that would go here. And so I will go to my local needlework store, which is Victoria and Rose Needle Arts. I went in right when she opened, and she had a lovely selection of threads. But that was like the first day. So who knows? Obviously, as people have been shopping and hearing about the store, people go buy things, which is great. But that means that maybe the color I'm looking for, she doesn't have it. If she doesn't have it, I'll figure it out. I'll find it somewhere and order it. I ordered these threads in 2020 when no one had anything. So now things are better in stock. So hopefully I'll be able to find it, and if not, I'll figure out what I need to do. The next piece I will have plans for, this is Winter Wonderland from an old issue of Cross Stitching Country Crafts. And this is for the magazine monthly challenge. The theme is fun and games, and they look like they're having a lot of fun ice skating. So this is a piece, I put quite a few stitches in it in December. And when I started it last year, and then I pulled it out for Christmas in July for just a little bit, but I'll try and get a big chunk on it for this month to bring it back for the magazine focus challenge. So these are the chimneys of I think it's actually meant to be a little in the chimneys of the building. So relatively easy stitch. This is actually a witch elk fabric, but it's really, really soft. It came this way. I didn't do this to it. It came this way. But it's a very easy fabric to use. Others are my Whipco pieces. One piece I haven't pulled out yet, but it's Simple Little Big Love by Alexandra Adelaide Needle Arts. And the second piece I have I've already shown for Whipco, which is Little Cake Shop. So for the month of September, my games. So in the magazine monthly challenge, they're doing what they're calling AB Singo. So basically, they're going through the alphabet. On a bingo board, there are 25 spaces. In the English alphabet, there are 26 letters. So they said no one's doing S. They wanted to make it a little bit more difficult. And then they also, like Whipco, everyone has, all of our Whipco boards are numbered the same. So theoretically, if everyone kept up with Whipco, you all would have this, like, once the correct numbers were called and we did the stitches, we all would have bingo at the same time, or Whipco at the same time. Because, when this month, or for September, it's 15 and 25, and 15 and 25 are, actually not the center block. Here and here. So we all would be doing that. And so to get around that, what Robin and Carolyn did was they said, okay, number your boxes 1 through, however you want to do it, but then have a way to randomize the letters. And they don't care how you randomize them. So I did what I'm sure a lot of people did. Well, I just plugged these 25 letters into the Tiny Decisions app, which is a wheel basically, and clicked spin. First letter that came up for me was G. Next letter that came up was C, and I put it on so it's blacked out when it's done, so it came down to the last 2 letters. So that's sort of what I did. And so all of us have a randomized board, so most people don't have G as their first letter. And then you can't read it here, but the actual projects I'm working on are there. And then they also gave us this that sort of was, how do you rationalize your projects? Because not many people have projects that, how do you link a U, for example? So here is my explanation. So some of it was fairly easy. My first one, apple sampler. An apple sampler. Things like that. But when I came to like U, I'm doing Gone Batty by Brenda Gervais, and I said, that's because there is an upside down bat. Okay, you can say that bats hang upside down, but, he's not, the cat. If I consider him right up, the bat is like that. So anyhow, and then every day for the first 25 days, they will spin and say, okay, box 3 was called. And then we do 100 stitches. And obviously there are 30 days in September, and you have until the end of the month to do your stitches. So if on September 1st you're really busy and you don't do that, you can do them September 5th, or you can do them September 30th. It doesn't matter. But the idea is that you only have to do 100 stitches. So if you were to go for bingo blackout, you would have 2,500 stitches that you've done. I always go for the blackout. I can't guarantee I'll get it, especially because I decided that I wanted to do a different project for each box because I really wanted to find a way to sort of hit a lot of different things. So the first thing I did was I plugged in all my magazine pieces that I have going because it is a magazine challenge. And then I looked at what else am I doing. So I looked at my letters of the month, what pieces have I selected for Crystal Academy, things that I know I'm going to be stitching on at some point. But then, other things I was, especially again, when I came to you, I was like, what do I do for that? For the X, I picked a piece that I have to X out a lot of things, i.e. frog, because I made a huge mistake on it and I keep finding reasons not to do it, to frog all of that. And so I will do 100 stitches in the proper place, but I will also take advantage of that time to take everything out. So that should be a lot of fun. The other games, there's another group that I've joined called So You Think You Can Stitch, which is brand new. And it's basically the first game, which will last 2 months, is based on The Amazing Race. So we're going to go visit a lot of different places. I know we're starting on Jekyll Island in Georgia, but I think it's going to be, we're going to visit lots of places in the world. And we have teams, and I'm on the team. There's one person on my team who I've played with in another game, and we were good teammates, but for the most part, it was sort of randomized. And so it will just be, don't really know what it has in store. I think, I think it's going to be done on weekly things. We had to do a pre-activity called packing, where you had to pack 15 items, and she gave you the list. There were 3 mandatory things like, I think it was passport, water bottle, backpack. And then you had to choose 12 other items. And you had to stitch like 100 stitches each to get there. I didn't have a huge amount of time because I joined the group late, but people who joined in early August had like the entire month of August to get those done. So the woman who's running it, sounds like she has a lot of creativity and has put a lot of thought into it. But until the game actually starts, I'm not really sure what to expect. But I'm hoping it'll be a good time. So that's another game. And then also in Semi-Sane Stitches, I've decided to do 2 things for September. I'm not sure how it's going to last. One is their crazy domino effect, where basically you have to link all of your, you have to have at least 10 projects and you have to link them. And the links all have to be different. Like, so I could have one artisy project and then do another artisy project, and then I can say this artisy project has a cardinal, so then I can link something else that has a cardinal, and then that has snow, so this one has snow. So but you have to have the first 10 things have to be different, and then you can, for number 11, repeat it, or you can go back, or you can keep going, but the links I think all have to be different. You can't just say, okay, I'm back to 11, so I can go back to say artisy again. And then it also has the added effect of, you can pick the level, but you can do it at, I think, 25, 50, or 100. And so the first one you did level 1 was you do 25 stitches. And then the next one you have to add 25, so then it's 50. And then for your third project, it would be 75. And then 50 would be 50, 100, 150, 100, 100, 200. I'm actually doing the highest level simply because if I had to stop after 25 stitches, 100 sometimes doesn't feel like it's very many. And you get points, and quite frankly, if you do it at 100 stitches, you actually accumulate points more quickly than if you do it at the lower levels. So I'm like, it's faster to stitch 100 stitches on one project than it is to stitch 25, 50, and then 20, just the speed at which you get there for me is faster. So I'm doing that. There's also Stitch Moonji. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Another game in Semi-Sane. I have no idea what to expect with that one. I suspect if I get a little overwhelmed, that's the one that will go, because I think what I've heard from people, it's a lot of fun, but I think there's a lot of sort of shifting course in that, and I'm not sure that will fit with everything else that I'm trying to accomplish, but we shall see. Karen from Semi-Sane is the moderator for that, and she did a great job with Survivor, so I'm sure she'll do a great job with Stitch Moonji. And the first thing that scares me is she talks about you pick your board, and then you have a figure that you have to move across the board, and the thought of doing that piece of technology, how do I even put a figure on a board, and how do I move it, is scarier than I want to think about. So, I may stumble my first day simply because I don't know how to do pick collage very well. But that is all I have to talk about plans. So let me talk about some stitchy kindness that I've gotten. So as I mentioned, I have a birthday, and I told my mother I wanted a gift certificate to my local needlework store. So she went and got that for me. So as soon as I'm able to drive, this thing keeps me from driving. So hopefully on Thursday I'll be able to go to the store. My husband would very happily take me. It's a 10-minute drive from our house. He would just drop me off and come back and pick me up. But I know I would just get lost in the store. And even if I don't buy that much, a couple hours could go by and he would start to worry and wonder if I did something silly, like tried to walk to the shopping mall next door, and whatever. He would just start to worry. So it's just better if I go on my own and say I have to go to all these 10 places and do errands, and he'll never know. But the reason why I mentioned the birthday, though, is in one of the groups I'm in, we have where we can send, if you say, oh, it's my birthday, people can send you a birthday card, and then you can also volunteer to send the card. So I've sent plenty of cards and usually throw in some like floss in there. And so I got a couple of birthday cards, but then one person went above and beyond, and she sent me like a whole Stitchy Kindness pack. And so I just want to show you a few of the things that she put in there. And this was totally unexpected. And so thank you so much. I don't have permission to say her name, but I won't. So a lot of small things. So this is a Mill Hill ornament, a little reindeer. Full kit, so the beads and the floss. This is a pattern, so it's a little called From Small Kind Things, and it's got, nice words like aloha, welcome, hello. It's a nice little chart. I don't know what the actual name of the pattern is, but it's really cute. And then we have another. This is so a little snowman, and it's not a kit, but this the way they finish this on a pillow. It's got this red ribbon, and the little red ribbon is in there. And then also this little ice cream cone, also with some thread kitted in. So the woman who sent this to me said, she periodically will destash items, and she would rather give them to another stitcher. So thank you so much for that. I really, really do appreciate it. So when No New Starts is over, and No New Starts 2021 ends in mid-December, which means a lot of us are going to be starting a lot of things. A couple of these will be on my potentials to start. Also through No New Starts, they did sort of a surprise giveaway. So for those of us who participated in some of the various, I don't want to say challenges, but prompts they had, there's a birthday one where you can periodically, every 2 weeks, if someone has a birthday, they say, this is what I'm stitching on, hey, come join me. And you don't have to stitch on that particular project. You just, if you have something by the same designer. And then unbeknownst to the participants, they said, here is, they basically said, they went through and they said, here are like some of the best progress we've seen. And it happened to be someone had picked Hawk Run Hollow. And I don't remember which one they were working on. I picked up a year at Hawk Run Hollow, and I got a block finish during that time period. And so I was picked for like the best for that 2-week period. And then I think they took all of those names and put them into a draw, and everyone got, if your name got pulled, then you got a prize. So my prize, I got this very nice little card, but in it was a nice little skein of floss. So a nice little yellow, so really pretty. I'm not sure entirely what company this is. It does say at the top Cottage Garden, and it says Creeping Jenny, which I believe is the color. But then at the very bottom, and it's not going to focus, it does say Crescent Color Works. So I don't know if this is a Crescent Color Work, and that was just Cottage Gardens was a line of it. I think many of you know Crescent Color Works is now Classic Color Works. And then I want to give away from Fat Cat Flosser, Lesley Hurley. And I thought I just got a yellow piece of Aida. But no, apparently what I won was 4 pieces of Aida. So I think these are like fat 8s. So they're all 18 counts. This nice sort of buttery lemony yellow. And then this sort of peach. Nice peach here, and it's a little bit more, it's a pastel, but it's a little bit brighter than what's appearing here. And then I have these two, one is slightly darker than the other, but sort of and they're 18 count aida, but that sort of flax color with the flecks in it. So thank you, Lesley, for those. I also, through various Facebook groups, got a few patterns which they give out through their Facebook groups for free, and I download them, and I do print them out because I'm of a certain age where I'm convinced that at some point magnet's going to go over all of my electronics and hit the cloud at the same time, and if I like something, if I don't print it out, I'm going to lose it. I know that's not going to happen, but nonetheless, I still print them out, even if I do them on Pattern Keeper. So this is from Heaven and Earth Designs. This is a pattern called Unicorn. So see if I can get a little bit closer on that. It's a very large piece, but I really think it's very beautiful artwork. And the artwork is by Stephanie, I'm going to say this wrong, Premoon Law. I think with Heaven and Earth Designs, when she gives out freebies through the Facebook group, it's there for a very short period of time. So if you see those and you like them, download them, because if you don't do it, you'll miss it. And then the other one I printed was Artisy. This is called Christine Falls, and I think this is in Canada. Not 100% sure, but Artisy, when she does these, she puts a post up about it, but then they go into her file section and they're always there. So different designers do it differently. I'm just very grateful for their generosity. And then I actually have some things I purchased. So all three of my fabric of the month came in. So first one is from Fortnight Fabrics. For them, this is a gray, and this is coming up much more blue than it actually is. I don't know what the name of this is, but really lovely color. Next one is from Color on Cotton, Neptune. And then the last one, which just came yesterday, so in case you haven't gotten this yet, I'm going to do spoiler alert. This is from Bestitch Me Fabrics, and I do the mixed groups. I never know if it's like the neutrals or her colors, and this one sort of seems in between. So I'm going to go, and so this is what it is here. So it sort of starts off as sort of a nice standard neutral, and then it's got these lovely greens and peaches. I don't know exactly what I will stitch on something like that, because I think it takes a very particular kind of pattern to do it on something like that, but it's lovely, lovely fabric, and I'm sure I will find something. So that is all I have for the stitching. If that's all you're here for, thank you. I do want to talk about a couple books that I'm reading and what I've been watching. So the first book I want to talk about is The Forest of Vanishing Stars by Kristen Harmel. This is a library book, so sorry about the glare there. So this is a book that takes place during the 20th century about an old woman who kidnaps a toddler and takes her out to live in the forest. And this is, I don't want to say late 1920s, 1930s. So the girl grows up living entirely in the forest, and they don't have like a hut there. I mean, they do build some shelters, but they're temporary and they move around with it, and she learns to survive in the forest. And the woman teaches her a lot of languages, and she, learns to read and math and all those things. So she's very well educated. Basically the old woman has said, she was told that, this girl needs to be kidnapped from bad people, and that she needs to learn how to live in the forest. And that old woman also says, and I know I'm going to die on this certain day, which she does. Basically then the girl's on her own, and it's now World War II, and Jews who have fled various places in Europe are now trying to survive in the forest. It's an austere environment, and so especially during the winter. And so just how do you survive off of what the forest has to give you? And so it's about her helping this group of, and several groups merge, but these Jews who are trying to hide from the Nazis, and quite frankly the Russians too. I don't know exactly which forest it is, but this is sort of in north central Europe. So it's a combination of Poland and what is now Belarus and Germany, and so that sort of area in there. And while it is a total work of fiction, she did a lot of research on sort of Jews who did live in the forest and tried to survive. There's one scene in this book where they go, they know that the Nazis are going to start going through the forest and hunt Jews, and so they go through a swamp because they know there's an island in the middle of the swamp, and they have to go live there for a couple of months because they know the Nazis will never go on through the swamp because they'll think no one can live there. And that is based on a factual event, although fictionalized. All the characters here are fictionalized. So very good read if you like historical fiction, especially during World War II. This is a very good read. This author, Kristen Harmel, is also, I found out, she lives in Florida. Not in my county. She lives, I think, in the Orlando area, so a couple hours south of me, but a good read. And then the other book I listened to an audiobook was Homegoing by Jessie, and it's sort of one of these books that goes over a couple hundred years. Starts off, which was what was then called the Gold Coast in Africa, which is now Ghana today, and basically it's sort of the slave trade, and it sort of has one timeline, but two locations. So one is the slave trade in what starts in the Gold Coast in a village, and then in what we call the castle, where the Brits are living, and then you follow this, again, you're not following all the slaves, but like a story of someone who was taken and a slave on the plantation, and then that person's child on the plantation, and then that person's child during Reconstruction, and then the next descendant, and who moves to New York and to Harlem, and sort of going through all of that, and then also a similar thing that goes on that's following the changes that happen in the Gold Coast, and then Ghana, and so just very, very well written. That just taking on that sort of style of a book can be challenging, let alone with a very sensitive subject matter of slavery. And I think he did a really, really good job with it. So highly recommend that book. And I listened to it, so I don't have a book to show you. But again, Jessie, and it's spelled first name Y-A-A, and the last name is G-Y-A-S-I. Homegoing is the name of that. And what I've been watching, we've decided that we're going to watch The Stand, which I think many of you know is based on a Stephen King novel that he wrote, I think like in the 1970s. And it was actually the first novel that he published. But the first version that was published, I don't want to call it abridged because it wasn't that it got published and then things got cut out. It was that the publisher at the time, Stephen King, wasn't very well known. And they said, they made a financial decision. They said, you're not a well-known author and it costs X amount to print 1,200 pages. So we need this to be shorter because we can, the price point that we can sell this at, it will cost too much to print all those pages for what we can sell your book for. And so he cut out several hundred pages from the book. And then when he became the writer that everyone knew, he got them to republish the book in the original version. And I've read the original one, and I've also read what he said about what he cut out, and it's typical. The basic plot is that in a lab in the United States, they have manufactured a flu virus, and the flu virus gets out, and it's virulent, and it kills over like 99.9% of the population, and the only people who survive are ones who have natural immunity to it. So it's not that they avoided it. There was no mask wearing. It was just simply they were exposed, but they didn't get sick. And how do the few numbers of people, how do they deal? But being Stephen King, it's, he uses this to have a reflection on society, and all of his characters are flawed. But the question is, what do you do with your flaws, and do you learn from them and help to create something that could be good? Or do you take those flaws and say, I have an opportunity to sort of live the way I want to live, and I don't want to say kill or be killed, but that is basically what happens. And it ends up, people get dreams, and they're sort of, sometimes they get both the figures in their dreams, but they sort of are drawn to one place, which is Boulder, Colorado, where the people who sort of, I don't want to call them the good because it's Stephen King, so they're good and bad people. But the people who sort of want to do the right thing end up there, and versus Vegas, where people who want to give in to some of their baser sins. So there's a lot of violence and debauchery, and I always go through, when you have so few people in the world, how can you kill so many people? But that's neither here nor there. But that sort of, sort of sin. And just this was original. There was one version that was done by HBO, I think in the late 80s or some point in the early 90s. And this is a version, I think they either filmed in 2018 or 2019. Not sure when they released it, because if it didn't release before March of 2020, my guess is they delayed in releasing it for obvious reasons. Now, this is not COVID, because as we all know, COVID, the death rate is not 99.9%. It's much lower than that, but basically in this world, if you get this highly virulent flu, it's the end of you. But I don't like horror novels, so I don't read a lot of Stephen King, but he does have some novels where he really sort of explores, more. I mean, there may be violence in it, but it's not violence for violence sake. It's more about human nature. And I think on this version, they have done, the director has done a really good job of sort of taking Stephen King's vision and sort of bringing it to the screen. So I think we're watching it on Netflix. I know we're doing it through one of the streaming services. It might be Paramount Plus. I don't know where we pick it up. My husband sets everything up, and I just sit down and watch. He controls the remote, and I'm okay with that. But if you take a look around, it's been interesting. Although it's the kind of thing that we can't watch it right before we go to bed. We have to put on some comedy afterwards. So. Well, I've been talking for over an hour, and this is my second video, so here's to hoping it doesn't get corrupted again. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in a couple of weeks. Bye.